Good afternoon. My name is Bill Collette. I am the CEO of the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, an organization that has served the Valley for 55 years. We represent the entire business community, supported by membership of more than 300 local businesses. I'd like to acknowledge that we're hosting these interviews on the unceded territory of the Upachesit and Sashat First Nations, and we thank and respect them for their ongoing courtesy to us. I'd also like to confirm that these interviews, while hosted by ourselves, are supported by Alberni Valley News, who will assist in video distribution, and by the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, who have provided us with funding so that we can distribute more widely. Our chamber also operates the Visitor Centre in Port Alberni under a fee-for-service agreement with the City of Port Alberni. We're licensed to do so from Destination BC. In normal years, we would welcome more than 25,000 people from all over the world to our building, and we'd connect with that many again through our various external operations. In 2020, just prior to the pandemic, we signed an agreement with the City of Port Alberni to operate commercial activities at the McLean Mill National Historic Site. These operations are considered by us as a social enterprise, thus we're in business for the good of everyone. We consider ourselves unique in the chamber world in that we ventured into this sort of program well before others had similar ideas on their radar. Filming this today is one of our newer employees, Mr. Richard Spencer. Richard is a local fellow who attends the Alberni District Secondary School. He is entering grade 12 and is working toward a career in film. And may I take a moment now to more formally introduce you, or more accurately, let's say, introduce Richard to you via a comment received just this week from a couple who reside in the Windsor area of Ontario. And I quote, "Thank you for organizing our tour at McLean Mill yesterday. Richard, our tour guide, was the most welcoming, pleasant, knowledgeable, and courteous young man. He made our experience at the mill a lasting memory. He's a keeper. We wish him every success in his future endeavors." And that's by Pam and Larry from Windsor, Ontario. So that's the kind of fellow we have. Now to welcome you, Mary Lee. Thank you for sending me a little bio. For the viewer here, Mary Lee was born in Ottawa and raised in a military family. She was inspired to follow in her father's footsteps and serve her country. She was among a small cadre of tenacious young women who were part of the 8th class at the Royal Military College of Canada in Kingston with female cadets. Mary graduated from RMC with a bachelor's degree in business and commerce and served as an air traffic controller for several years. But it was her passion for community engagement and promoting the mission and values of Canada's servicemen and women that prompted Mary to switch to the public affairs branch. This new responsibility took her around the world, including a tour in the Arabian Gulf as part of the US-led coalition force on the war on terrorism. Mary retired from the Canadian Armed Forces at the rank of Major in 2007 and started a communications consulting business. She worked in a variety of industries, including aviation, government, healthcare, and education. Mary went after her dream of earning a master's degree in public relations, graduating in 2019 with the Academic Achievement Award. Mary was recently the manager of communications for the Comox Valley Schools, the role that allowed her to promote and celebrate student success and teachers' accomplishments and highlight many inclusive and innovative programs, including mental health and wellness and Indigenous education. Mary resides in the Comox Valley with her husband Gavin and their daughter Jillian, and also has a stepdaughter, Kelsey, who lives in Alberta. Welcome, Mary.
Hello, I'm Mary Lee, and I'm your federal Conservative candidate for Courtenay Alberni. And let me just start off by saying how honored I am to live, work, and play in this beautiful part of Canada on the traditional territories of our First Nations. And it is an honor to serve and work hard for you. And our riding is amazing, over 7,900 square kilometers. And as I've traveled from one side to another, I am seeing such a diverse and abundance of industries that keep our sector alive. We are a forestry, fishing, small business, tourism and recreation, and trades. And as I've been knocking on doors from one side of the east all the way over to the west coast, I'm hearing one common concern. How are we going to come out from underneath pandemic uncertainty and fiscal anxiety to secure our future? You know, with a career spanning more than 20 years in the military as an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, and then followed by 10 years of strategic communications planning, I know this: you cannot achieve a mission without a plan. The mission, secure the future. The plan, Canada's recovery plan. This is a 5-pillar plan to secure the future by securing jobs, securing accountability, securing mental health, securing the country, and securing the economy. This plan is further augmented with a very robust and thoughtful and specific approach to address the climate change and environmental health. You know, Canada's Conservatives are the only party to roll out a plan. It was released by Aaron O'Toole, our leader, on the second day of the campaign. And he did this because he wanted Canadians to have a very informed decision, to make a very important decision, and have the information available to them to understand how we're going to secure the future. Canadians want leadership. Canadians want to come out from underneath this uncertainty right now. And Canadians want hope. Canadians also need direction, and they deserve dignity and respect. And so I bring to this candidacy, this election campaign, my leadership. I also bring my people-centric approach, which is deeply rooted in my military experience, as well as my strategic communication experience serving in healthcare, education, small business sector, and the nonprofit sector. This is lived experience, real world experience. And this is why I know I can make a difference for our riding here in Courtenay, Alberni. I will work hard for you. I will champion your voice in Ottawa. I took an oath in 1987 to serve my country, and this candidacy is just an extension of that oath.
Okay, our first question here today is, what action or actions will your party take on the poison drug crisis, the opioid overdose crisis in our community and most others?
2, 1.
Addressing the opioid crisis is part of Canada's recovery plan. This is part of Canada's recovery plan to secure mental health. Mental health is health, and Canada's Conservatives will treat the opioid epidemic that we see locally and nationally as the urgent health crisis that it is. Sadly, every day we're seeing many Canadians take their lives to a drug overdose. And since the pandemic, that number has nearly doubled. We are truly in a crisis. Canada's Conservatives have a plan to make a historic investment in mental health and addiction. And here's just some of the policies that we have moving forward. To invest $325 million over the next 3 years to create 1,000 residential treatment beds, and also to create 50 care community centers across the country. Enhance the delivery of culturally appropriate addiction treatment to our First Nations communities. To provide $1 million over 5 years to boost funding to Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs, and to reorient the Canadian drug and substance strategy to ensure that every person has resources who's struggling with addiction. Interestingly enough, in September 2018, Health Canada launched a 9-month questionnaire to seek input from Canadians unanimously about what next steps we need for the drug and substance strategy. Participants were also invited to share their own personal stories. And some of the results showed, alarmingly, stigma and also discrimination were some of the barriers to receiving treatment. And also we realized in that, or also Health Canada was able to realize in that in order to overcome these problems, we have to get to mental health first. This is what was being expressed. And that is why Canada's Conservatives Mental Health Action Plan is a very robust plan that addresses the mental health issues, the underlying issues first and foremost, so that we can avoid later on the substance abuse and mistreatment. And we also plan to massively boost the health transfers to each province. This will be more than the health transfers that we have seen from the commitment from the Liberal government so far. And lastly, to create a Canadian-wide national 3-digit suicide prevention hotline, so nobody ever has to feel alone when they're in their darkest moments during this crisis.
Our second question here today is Canadian Maritime Engineering, with offices in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Ontario, and British Columbia, including Port Alberni, is working closely with the Port Alberni Port Authority, one of 17 Canadian port authorities, to develop and operate a much-needed floating dry dock in the Port Alberni Deep Sea Harbour. CME has also engaged support from community partners, including the City of Port Alberni, ourselves at the Chamber of Commerce, and others, to help facilitate the concept. There is significant lack of capacity to service current marine and coastal needs, emphasized by an obvious loss of business opportunity to the US, Mexico, and further abroad markets. The benefits to the marine and shipping industries are obvious, as are the social, economic, and environmental outcomes of a successful build of a new dry dock in Port Alberni. So the question is, what will you do and your party do, if elected, to achieve the funding support necessary to build the floating dry dock in Port Alberni?
So Canada's recovery plan is all about getting hard-working Canadians back to work to boost the economy. And to stimulate the economy, we need to create jobs. To have jobs, you need to have the supporting infrastructure in place so that we can get Canadians back to work and in jobs that improve the quality of life in communities, both socially and economically. The proposed floating dry dock is perfectly aligned with this plan to boost the economy through job creation with the infrastructure that can support that. Port Alberni's economic renewal with this floating dry dock is the perfect opportunity to create the jobs that will enhance the town's appeal, to draw in more investment, to draw in more businesses, to even draw in more tourism. And there's no reason why we can't create a marine hub as this one, such as that we see over in Greater Vancouver. The work has been done in this community. The work has been done through your community project committee, and it should be celebrated that you were able to bring it together with a community collaboration and input that you have, with a collaboration between your First Nations, the City of Port Alberni, your Chamber of Commerce, and as well as your regional district. I totally support this because it's right in line with Canada's recovery plan. Interestingly, we have Canada's Infrastructure Bank. This bank of money went unspent for years during the Liberal government. Promises were made, infrastructure projects were promised, but they were never delivered. Canada's recovery plan plans to abolish, scrap the failed Canada Infrastructure Plan and use that unspent money to create projects. And it's identified in Canada's recovery plan that those projects are going to start immediately because they are critical to boost the economy, because they are critical to create jobs so that we can have more meaningful quality of life within our own communities.
It is widely acknowledged by the BC fishing communities that DFO has lost touch with them. This was in clear evidence over the past week with many commercial boats anchored in our harbour who were permitted fishing rates prior to the largest annual fishing derby for recreational fishers on the island. The commercial boats anchor but do not contribute in any way to the local or even island communities, whereas the sports fishers do. The results of the recent salmon derby were disappointing for many, due largely to an unexpected opening prior to the weekend. Non-selective catch of salmon and steelhead by commercial boats, especially in terminal areas, must be eliminated or transitioned to selective fishing technologies to conserve wild salmon and steelhead stocks. The question we have is, as our representative in Ottawa, would you require DFO to immediately shift to a marked selective fisheries by marking all of our hatchery-produced Chinook and Coho salmon? Would you move to restructure and rebuild DFO and its punitive community policies and rebuild our salmon resource? If so, how could local communities generate revenue from the resource so that communities that steward and maintain the resource can invest and grow from it?
Yes to the first part. Already we have 25 members of parliament who signed on, co-signatories of the letter calling for the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries to enable a marked select Chinook fishery. And 13 of those members of parliament who signed are from the Conservative Party. So I most certainly would support this effort in restoration and conservation of our Pacific salmon, especially for at-risk populations. Secondly, yes, Canada's Conservatives will develop a Pacific salmon strategy focused on making measurable progress towards restoring at-risk stocks. This includes implementing mass marking programs at BC fish hatcheries, allowing for marked select harvest and salmon in the BC sports fishing, protecting sensitive fish populations while also maintaining the health of BC's public fisheries. Some of the key highlights in the Pacific salmon strategy include stock assessment, stock recovery planning, and enforcement of science-based catch limits, because these three things are important predictors for well-managed fisheries. Consistent fishing regulations is so important, and they have to be based on sound policy. And we will ensure that the sustainability of stocks and the sustainability of fisheries can be supported. So whether it's in sports, commercial, commercial and also in our communities that depend on fishing for their livelihood, last-minute fishing changes must be based on conservation and not on politics. We need better communication. We need to collaborate together among all user groups, resource user groups, including sports, fishing, and Indigenous groups, to actively participate in the fishery and the hatchery program, and to make sure that there's viability in the industry for years to come.
So question 4. The current COVID crisis, and more importantly, the responses directed at it, are causing a significant level of backlash across all populations, be it the general public, small and medium-sized businesses, and even local governments. The problem is exacerbated by the frequent changes to provincial policies, which often differ across the country. This has led to a level of uncertainty never seen in our lifetimes, resulting in business closures, fire sales of businesses, employment challenges across every sector, and unfortunately, it appears to have led to a widening of the gap between those that have, those that thought they had, let alone those that don't have. What will you do, if elected, to ensure the business community that the uncertainty of today will not continue to repeat itself, thus enabling them to restart their businesses with a level of confidence that they can open the doors tomorrow and the next day?
So securing jobs is one of 5 pillars in Canada's recovery plan to secure the future. And the Conservatives are the only party to have a plan to help Canada come out from underneath the pandemic uncertainties and fiscal anxiety and get our economy surging, back up and running. 2 things to address in this question are the pandemic uncertainties and the fiscal anxiety. So I'm going to first address fiscal anxiety. To get workers back to work so they can earn a decent income to help stimulate the economy. So to get our economy back on track, Canada's Conservatives will create 1 million jobs in as many sectors, as all sectors across Canada, especially the hardest hit sectors in which we see in this region alone, tourism, recreation especially. And this will be done as quickly as possible. Some of the ways that Canada's Conservatives will do this is what's called the Canadian Job Surge Plan, which you'll find in Canada's Recovery Plan. This involves Conservatives government paying at least 25% of the salary of net new hires for the next 6 months for employee wages subsidies, or when the employee wages subsidies expire this October, and then up to 50% of salaries for those workers who have been unemployed for 6 months or more. They will also help small businesses to get back on their feet by launching what's called Main Street Business Loan. So this is a loan similar to what we saw with the CEBA, the Canadian Emergency Business Account of $60,000. But a lot of small businesses found that $60,000 just nearly wasn't enough. So under the similar terms, the Canada Conservatives will immediately offer a loan of up to $200,000, and depending on how much revenue was lost during the pandemic, those businesses can have up to 25% forgiveness. Now, secondly, pandemic uncertainty. In order to address pandemic uncertainty, we need to work with our public health guidelines. Conservatives respect that the responsibility rests with our provincial governments to implement and manage their own public health. More importantly, moving forward and opening the doors and getting people back to work in our small businesses, we have to ensure that Canadians feel safe to go back to work. They need timely, relevant, and accurate information at their disposal so that they can feel safe and secure going back to work. Canada's Conservatives are calling for information back to daily health announcements and updates from our Canada's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam. We're also calling for some more collaborative efforts between the provinces so that we can have a more robust and succinct policy in terms of being able to ensure that going back to work, people are safe and feel comfortable enough and secure enough to go back to work. A coordinated effort to deliver timely and accurate information across all of Canada, and particularly in our province here in BC. Canada's Conservatives is also calling for more cooperation with our public health officers in all the provinces by being able to provide timely information and accurate information. It also involves securing the country by being able to stockpile more of our own products to address the pandemic in terms of manufacturing more rapid tests and tracking the outbreaks, as well as managing our personal protection equipment stockpiles.
Question 5. The West Coast supply chain and transportation system is inefficient and ineffective as it continues to be choked by exponential congestion in the Lower Mainland. Canadians appear to be unaware of the fact that because of the high cost of land in the Lower Mainland and congestion throughout the road network, that most international goods are loaded onto trucks, then transported to Calgary area distribution centers, only to be shipped back to Metro Vancouver for eventual redistribution to the end user. This has resulted in higher costs for the manufacturer, with those costs passed along to the consumer, and perhaps more importantly, the cost to the environment can only be described as enormous. These costs are stifling Vancouver Island's ability to grow and transform its economy, making exporting finished products increasingly uncompetitive for its more than 800,000 residents. So the question is, what do you, if elected, propose to do to improve and invest in the transportation and supply chain model to continue to encourage Vancouver Island ingenuity, economic competitiveness, and reduce the significant and often ignored environmental impacts?
Supply chain efficiency to stimulate and support the growth of the economy is very necessary here on Vancouver Island to help Canadian businesses, to help Canadian consumers, and to help taxpayers. And as a Canadian Port Authority here in Port Alberni, I fully support its mandate to facilitate trade and providing opportunities for employment. And similar to what we discussed with the dry dock, this port creates a significant economic benefit, perfectly aligned with the type of infrastructure plans that Canada's Conservatives have to immediately get back into all of our sectors across Canada to support economic growth, both socially and to improve quality of life, because it invites more investment, invites businesses, and invites tourism. I totally support Port Alberni's economic renewal and support the job creation and enhance its town appeal by drawing in more investments such as this infrastructure investment to move more business around and in turn help stimulate tourism. Build it and they will come.
Question 6. The Canada-British Columbia Expert Panel on the Future of Housing Supply and Affordability released their final report in June of 2021. The question: how will you work towards implementing the report's recommendations, such as making new infrastructure investments conditional on official community plans, zoning bylaws, and other local policies to allow for increased density and a mix of housing types?
Addressing housing affordability is such an integral part of Canada's recovery plan. This is a detailed plan to secure the future and grow the economy, but also making it more affordable for Canadians. Canada's Conservatives recognize that the rising housing costs can be addressed by removing the barriers that are preventing municipal and provincial governments to be able to bring more supply into the market. Basic economics. We are not keeping up with the supply, with the growing demand and growing population that we're seeing in this part of the country. Another way we're going to address the soaring cost of prices is addressing the foreign ownership by banning foreign ownership that's coming into the market when the foreign owners have no plans to reside here in Canada. These are some of the issues that to address the affordability costs, and it really comes down to working together to remove those barriers that are allowing families and allowing the production of more supplies so that families can have the right for a decent and affordable home. Working with the municipalities and working with the province, how can we streamline the application process, for example, to allow more permits and to work within the official community plans and zoning plans. We also, some of the biggest takeaways also from the affordability plan and Canada's recovery plan is to implement a plan to build 1 million homes over the next 3 years. And we want to make it easier for families to be able to get a mortgage so that they can afford these homes. And again, it's addressing the barriers such as removing the mortgage stress tests that are required for a family to even be able to afford a home and to apply for a home.
So an additional question that came to us is this one. Since this riding had 3 residential schools, including Alberni, Ahousaht, and Christie, and is home to a large First Nations population impacted by those schools, what actions would you and your party, take to move truth and reconciliation with local First Nations forward? Reconciliation
is an everyday activity. And for answering this question, I just want to be able to tell a story. It's a very deep, meaningful story to me because I was working with a wonderful group of Indigenous support workers with Comox Valley School, School District 71. And at the time that we heard the shocking information that came out of Kelowna, it was devastating for many of us to handle. So our school district Indigenous support staff put together what we called Holding Space. It was a very endearing and beautiful time for us to come together over the course of about a week or 10 days. And it was just a place to be together, to grieve, to acknowledge, to take in the information, to share stories, whether we had to laugh or to cry, to do beadwork, to play the drums. It didn't matter. It was holding space because in that place, we allowed each other to do what was ever necessary to heal. And Canada's Conservatives recognize that too. This is one of the reasons why I was so drawn to the party platform. We want to uphold the actions of 71 to 76, but also more so, it's coming together as one, in unity, in cooperation, without any agenda, without any judgment. We need to grow together and rebuild as a country on so many different levels. Reconciliation is a very important part of that. And that is why Canada's Recovery Plan recognizes that it's not a one of, but it's 5 pillars. And in those 5 pillars, all communities and our Indigenous communities are addressed. Affordability, mental health, building our country, giving opportunities for jobs, and to get the economy going again, to be proud Canadians, and to be united. Erin O'Toole is a leader who wants to lead everyone, regardless of background, cultural, age, gender, sexual orientation. He's a leader of tomorrow, and Canada needs leadership. Canada also needs to have those deep, meaningful connections so that we can heal together. Reconciliation is important. Canada's recovery plan and its robust environmental plan is our roadmap to secure the future. I'm going to work hard for you to serve you, my fellow Canadians, in this beautiful part of Vancouver Island that we call home here in Courtenay, Alberni. I served my country proudly for several years, and I will most certainly do it again. You know, we've heard this before, and it's a very subtle yet effective reminder. United we stand, divided we will fall. For if we don't stand united and come together as Canadians, sitting on the sidelines chanting very loudly are other nations that are saying, divide and conquer. I conclude by reiterating a profound and timely words of a young American woman, an individual whom we should all look to with inspiration. What unites us is more important than what divides us. Those are the words spoken of Amanda Gorman and her poem, The Hill We Climb. Nationalism is the glue that binds us. We are Canada. Let's get to work.
Mary, thank you for joining us this afternoon. On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, the Alberni Valley News, who are going to help us distribute this video, and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, we thank you for joining us and for your wonderful responses to our questions. And we invite the public to get out and vote. And we also remind the public that we're all going to be better off if everybody invests in the jab in the arm, and we think that's obviously going to help us all. So we encourage people to do that. And again, we remind you to vote, and we thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.